So let's start with Webdynpro ABAP. Welcome to the first class of Webdynpro ABAP. So we will start with the introduction part of Webdynpro ABAP, and then we will see the advantages and to the system then, and we will see what are all the different entities and different parts of an application which we have to develop in order to create a Webdynpro application. So from a technical standpoint, SAP Webdynpro for Java in ABAP is a revolutionary step in the development of web-based user interfaces. So SAP used to develop the applications using screen programming in basic ABAP, and those programs used to run always in SAP GUI frontend. So there was always a predefined way of running SAP applications. You have to log in into a server and then probably use some transaction code to run a SAP program. So that's how it was always been designed. But since the evolution of software industry, people have realized that there is more and more application adoptions through browser. So SAP has came up with a web technology called Web Dynpro and BSP technology. So there are two web technologies by SAP so far. One is Web Dynpro and one is the BSP called Business Server Pages. So Web Dynpro was mainly used for ERP applications and some of the PLM and SRM applications, and the BSP technology was mainly used for CRM applications in SAP. So Web Dynpro is also available in two variants. One is the Java variant and one is the ABAP variant. So we will be looking into the Web Dynpro for ABAP. So people who are comfortable with ABAP programming language can use the Web Dynpro for developing web applications. So it's completely unlike any design paradigm previously used by SAP, and represents a quantum leap in the development of web-based ERP applications. So there is a large shift of applications from the conventional SAP applications to the web-based applications through the Web Dynpro. So already, as I mentioned, there are lots of areas like HCM, CRM, SRM. There are different applications which have already been built and developed and shipped by SAP to their customers, and a lot of enhancements can also be done in these applications by partners. So Web Dynpro applications are built using declarative programming techniques based on model view controller paradigm. So that's basically an architecture which
what is a declarative programming techniques?
Which is the line you're talking about? Declarative programming techniques. So declarative means you will be doing the same stuff, like you have to declare the variables, you have to declare your data types, and then on top of that you have to start building your application like UI elements and all such things. So declarative means you have to declare all your data variables at the beginning of the application start, and then you will use those variables in your programming. For an example, you will shortly see in the demo that we have to declare something called a variable, and then an input field can be linked to that variable in order to transfer the data back from the screen to program. So that's what a declarative programming technique is. So basically, all these such techniques follows the MVC architecture, which is prominently known. Your .NET framework, your latest Java applications are all based on MVC architecture, wherein in this architecture, basically you specify which user elements you wish to have on the client, which is the view part. View part basically defines your UI part, the front end part, what you want to show to the user. Then you define where those UI elements are going to get data from. That's your model part, where you define how many variables you will declare and how the data transfer will take place between screen and program. And then you also define the navigation part declarative in your application. So I will show you in the demo that how we can allow the navigation between multiple screens in a Web Dynpro. And all the code to create the user interface is then generated automatically within the standard runtime framework. So most of the things you will be doing, keep on drag and drop and such kind of things, and the code for doing that things will be generated automatically in the background. You need not have to write the code for that. So Web Dynpro will take care of all your coding part. Most of the things you will be doing declarative, like drag and drop options and such kind of things you will be using. So Web Dynpro ABAP is available since NetWeaver 7.0 version onwards. For developing the entities of Web Dynpro, your object navigator has been enhanced. So that's your basically SEAD transaction, which has been enhanced to develop the entities of Web Dynpro. So what are all the benefits of Webdynpro programming? So you minimize the coding using that and maximize the design part. So basically using Webdynpro, lot of code can be suppressed and most of the things can be generated at runtime, and you have to put a very little amount of effort in terms of coding. It maximizes your design, so you can focus more on the design part of the UI, and there are lots of beautiful UI elements which are present as compared to basic ABAP in Webdynpro. So you can make use of those UI elements to make your design more robust and more lucrative to the end user. It separates the layout and logic, supports the use of components. So in Webdynpro, you will be basically developing something called a component, and later point in time, you consume one component into another component. So basically, you'll see something called a reuse of component. It supports data binding. So data binding is one of the key feature of Webdynpro, which I will be demoing today. How we can link the UI elements with the variables. That's your data binding feature. Runs on multiple platforms, browser-based zero footprint, which means irrespective of any browser which you run, your application will look like same. So you will not see any major difference in the application based on browser. It's not based on browser. And it provides accessibility support, so which is basically a product standard of SAP software, wherein even the blind people, the physically disabled people can also make use of your software. So it provides all the accessibility support guidelines. Apart from that, there are some major advantages like portal integration, SAP Adobe Form integration, and you have a very good integration with SAP NetWeaver Business Client with the Webdynpro. So there are so many inbuilt capabilities of this framework which it provides us apart from these key advantages. All in all, the user experience will be improved, and you can develop more faster and more powerful UIs using Webdynpro. So let's start with the architectural part. What are all the different entities which will be involved in that? So you have something called a Webdynpro component which you will be creating. That's the first thing which you will be creating in Webdynpro. So like in your basic ABAP, you create a module pool program to start with. Similarly, here you create a Webdynpro component. So later point in time, you will create your screens in module pool program. That is purely equivalent to views. So one screen is equivalent to views here in the Webdynpro. So as and when you develop a screen, similarly in Webdynpro, you will be developing something called a view. Now view is actually consists of two parts. One is the layout part. So in the layout part of the view, you will be designing all your UI elements. So you will be placing the UI elements like buttons, input fields, tables, such things. And then you will have a view controller part which will have the logic of your UI element. Let's say if I put a button there, and when I click on the button, I want to do something. So that particular code part will be there in the view controller section. Similarly, all my data declaration, like with respect to UI element, should be done into the view controller part. Then coming to the window part, window is basically defines the combination of each view. For an example, if on one screen you want to display two multiple screen combinations, so in such cases you have to combine the views and make one window out of it. So that we will be also looking into the demo today. Then coming to the component controller part, component controller is a container which contains the functionality of the entire component. So let's say if I have a functionality to add two numbers, and that functionality I want to use in the first view and in the second view. So in such case, I will put that functionality in the component controller, so that that functionality can be accessible through all the other controllers. So component controller is a container where you place all your global functionality, which is particular to your component. So we will be demoing that also today. So let's go to system and create our first Webdynpro component, and we'll see what is the meaning of these different entities and how we can make use of these entities to develop our web application. So I'll go to SEAD transaction and I go to my local objects. So now I right click on Webdynpro and create a new component. So I choose option create and just say create a new Webdynpro component. So now it shows me a pop-up wherein I have to enter the component name and the description of the component. So I enter a component name as y wdp underscore 0001. So that's my component name which I'm giving. I provide a description of my component as my first component, and I give a window name here. So you can see here that I can provide a window name and a view name. So by default in Web Dynpro, one window and one view will be created inside a component. So when you create a new component at that time, one view and one window will be created automatically as part of this component. Now, I click on OK and save the component into my local object. So I save the component into my local object now, and you can see that my component is created. So now I go and click on Object List button in the application toolbar of SAP screen, and so that it can show my component and its related entities on the left-hand side panel. So you can see on the left-hand side now my component is created. So what are all the different things which are created along with the component? So along with the component, one component controller has been created automatically. One main view has been created, and one window which we have defined have been created along with the component. So these are the default entities which gets created when you create a new component. So let's understand about these entities one by one. So first I double click on the component controller. So as I mentioned earlier that a component controller is a central controller. It's a container where you place a global functionality. So just like in a module pool program, if you want to create a variable which you want to share with the different screens, so you will put that variable in the top include. So if you want to share that variable with different includes, so probably you will put it into the top include. Similarly here, if a variable which you want to share with multiple controllers, you have to create in the component controller. And component controller is the default controller which gets created. You cannot delete this component controller. And you can have only one component controller per component. So now in the component controller, you have a section called context. So context is a section where you define all your variables. So just like in ABAP, you use data statement to define your variables. In here, you will use the context section to define the variable. So now I come to the context section and you can see there is a node called context root node. So there's a default node added as part of your context section. This node is called as context root node. So I will now right click on this context root node. And so I want to basically create a structure now. So I right click on the context root node and choose create a node. So what am I doing here is I'm creating a new node as part of my context root node. So this context root node you cannot even delete. It will be present in all the context sections. So now here I give the node name as node 1. So I will not talk about these properties at this point of time because there is a separate unit on the context section which we will be covering as part of this course. So right now I'll just leave the node name as node 1 and say OK. So now when I say OK, a new node with the name node 1 has been created. So this is just like an empty structure. So for us an empty structure doesn't make any sense. So what we're going to do is now we will place an attribute or a field inside this structure. So now to add a field inside the structure, you have to right click on the node under which you want to add. So now I want to add an attribute inside my node 1. So right click on the node 1. Choose option create and add an attribute. So this is just like creating a variable using data statement. So now I provide my attribute properties like attribute name. So I give the attribute name as ATTR1 and I give the type of this attribute as string. So this is exactly equivalent to writing data attribute 1 type string. So basically it will create an attribute inside your node 1. So that's how you can see everything is being done declaratively. You need not have to mainly write your code in order to do this. And to generate this variable in the background, Webdynpro will generate the code automatically. We need not have to worry about it. So that's my node 1 and attribute 1. I will say my component controller. Now let's navigate to view. So as I mentioned, my view will have two parts. So now I double click on the view, and my view will basically have two parts now. The first part of the view is called layout part, and rest of other things are combinedly known as view controller. So all the tabs apart from the layout tab, properties, inbound, outbound, context, attributes, actions, and methods, all these tabs combinedly called as view controller. So right now I'm in the main view controller. It's the main view controller. So now what am I going to do is I'll go to the context section of view controller. So this is the section where you define all your variables with respect to UI element. So like in basic ABAP, when you define a field on the screen painter, you should have a corresponding variable in your program with the same name. Like if I define a field with the name Anubhav on the screen, in the screen painter, I should declare that field with some type into my program as well. Similarly, in Webdynpro also, you have to define your variables which are respected with respect to the UI elements. So that's why I've created that attribute ATTR1 in the component controller. You can see on the right hand side, it is showing the context of component controller. So the node 1 and attribute 1 of that is being shown. So I will drag this node 1 from the right hand side and drop it to the context root node of my main view controller. So basically, I want to use that variable which I've defined in the component controller into my view controller. So this is my view controller and that was my component controller. So I defined this mapping to use the variable which I've defined in the component controller. This process is known as context mapping. This process is known as context mapping. So context mapping is a process of sharing the data between controllers. In this case, I share the data between component controller and the main view controller. So basically when you copy this, it will not create another node. It will basically just reference this node in the view controller. This is just a reference of that node in the view controller. So if I change the value of this attribute here in the view controller, it gets reflected automatically to the component controller because it is just a reference of that node in my view controller. It is not the copy of that. It's just a reference. So that's my node 1 created as part of my view controller. Now we will go ahead and create an input field on the screen. So I go to the layout tab. So that's my layout section wherein I define my UI elements. So to define the UI elements, all the UI elements has to be created under a section called root UI element container. So this is the place under which you will create all your UI elements. So I right click on this and choose insert element. So click on insert element, it opens up small pop-up and here I can enter my element ID and the type of the element. So I say INP field 1 and the type of this as input field. Type of UI element is input field. I click on OK. As soon as I click on OK, a field has been created on the screen. But right now this field is not belonging to any attribute. And if you not belong this field to an attribute, if you not attach it to attribute, this field cannot be rendered on the screen because this field has to attach to a memory. When user enters the data on the screen, it has to go and sit at some memory place in the background. So that memory will be allocated by context. So that's why we have created that attribute in the context. So that now we can link this input field with the attribute which we have defined in the context section. So in basic ABAP, it happens automatically because you will keep the field name same as the field name on the screen. But here in Web Dynpro, you have to attach your attribute manually with the field. So that's my input field. And the right bottom corner, I have the properties of the input field. So one of the property is called value property, which I have to link with the attribute. So I select this value property and click on this button, obligatory binding missing. So I click on that, and you can see that it is showing me the attribute. So I select the attribute ATTR1 and click on OK. So when you click on the binding, it will open the current context. So this is your current context. If I wouldn't have mapped this node with the view controller, I wouldn't be able to see this node 1. So it opens the current context. So I'm in the main view, so it opens the main view context. So now I will link my input field with this attribute 1. This process is known as data binding. So data binding is the process of linking your context node or attribute with the input UI element or any other UI element for that matter. That's okay. So I did the binding now and my job is done. So now I will just go to display mode and activate my entire component. So now I right click on my component and activate my component. So my component is now active. So in basic ABAP, in order to test the module full program, you have to create a transaction code. Similarly, in Web Dynpro ABAP, in order to test a Web Dynpro component, you have to create an application. So to create a Web Dynpro application now, so right click on the component, click on create, and create a Web Dynpro application. So Web Dynpro application basically creates a URL for you because it's a web application. So when you create an application, it creates a URL for us. So I click on application and say OK. And you can see that a Web Dynpro application has been created. It is created a URL. I will save this into my local object. That's it. My application is ready for testing. And now I click on execute button. So when I click on execute button, system will automatically launch the browser for me. So you just have to create a component, put your UI elements in the view, bind them, do the context mapping which is required, and just create an application and execute the application. Apart from that, we have talked about two concepts. One is the context mapping, and second is the data binding concept. Any doubts so far in the meantime?
No.
Okay. The system is just loading the application. And yes, you can see that input field is created. So that's your input field.
We were binding with a particular attribute.
Yes. So now actually it is linked to that attribute. Whatever value you will enter here, that will go and sit into that attribute. So now we will do one more exercise wherein we will see how we can navigate from one screen to another screen. So what am I going to do is right now we have a main view. So that's your main view. I'm going to place a button on the main view. So when you click on this button, it's going to take you to another screen, which is altogether a different view for us. So that's going to take me to a different screen altogether. So I will probably call this as view 2. And on view 2, I'm going to place the same kind of back button. So this back button is going to take me back to the main view. So basically I want to show a bidirectional navigation from one view to another view. So that's how we're going to do now. So you'll have a main view, you click on a button, it will take you to view 2. Here you press the back button, it will take you back to the main view. So that navigation we are going to implement now. So for that, first of all, we'll create a view 2 and we create a back button in the view 2. So let's go to the system and create a new view. So now I right click on the views and in this I choose an option called create. So that's going to give me a pop-up for creating a new view. I provide the name of the new view as view 2. And click on OK. So this time it's a new view which is being created. And that's your second view. So it's a view to view controller this time. Earlier we were looking into main view controller and this is a view to view controller. So I'm going to place a button in this now. So right click on the root UElement container to insert a new UElement. Say insert element and create a button. So the name of the UElement type is button. The new button has been placed on the layout. Now I provide the text property of this button to provide a label for the button. So that's my label for the button as back. You can see that button is right now not active. Why button is not active? Because it cannot find the code associated to the button. So when you click on the button, you basically have to trigger some code. In basic ABAP, what we do is we assign OK code to each element, each button. And in the PI block, we check for the OK code associated to the button. And then based on that, we do the processing. But in Web Dynpro, you will have a dedicated method for each action. Like button or link or any UI element for that matter, you will have a dedicated action for each thing. So you can see the event section of this button UI element. In this, you have an on action element. So on action is the event for this. So I click on create button to create an action for this. So I click on create and provide the action name as back. So provide the action name as back and click on OK. So now my action for the button has been created. You can also watch this action in the Actions tab. So when I go to Actions tab, I will be able to see that a back action has been created for me. So you can see a back action has been created. Now in front of that, you can see that event handler method for this back action also being created by Web Dynpro. So this is the method wherein you have to put all your code which you want to trigger when user clicks on that button. You can also find this method in the Methods tab. So when I navigate to the Methods tab, I can even see that method on action back here. Apart from that, I can see there are 6 other methods which are available. We have not created these methods. So they are standard methods which are automatically added by Web Dynpro. We will look into each and every method and use of each and every method in the next unit. So these are right now, you can name them as hook methods. So they are called hook methods. So hook methods are the methods which are already added by Web Dynpro framework inside your controller. There is a use of these methods, the dedicated use of these methods I will be explaining in the next unit. So now the back button is created. So basically when user clicks on back button, you have to go out of view 2. The navigation for the view will be done using plugs. So inbound plug is used to come inside a view, and outbound plug is used to go out of a view. So we have to define inbound and outbound plug in order to enable the navigation for this view. So I go to inbound plug name and create an inbound plug. So I create an inbound plug as in underscore view 2. Go to outbound plug name and create an outbound plug for this. So when you create an outbound plug, Web Dynpro framework automatically creates a method in the background. The name of that method will be fire underscore outbound plug name underscore PLG. So that method Web Dynpro framework will automatically create in the background for us when you create an outbound plug. So now this outbound plug is created. I go to the methods and select my action on action back. When user clicks on back button, I will trigger the outbound plug to go out of my view 2. So we come inside method and method, and now we don't know what code we will write. So we use this small code wizard button in the application toolbar to generate the code. Most of the Web Dynpro code can be generated using this wizard. I click on the wizard option, navigate to the general tab, and choose the option start navigation. And I provide my outbound plug name here. My outbound plug name is out underscore view 2. Click on OK button. And you can see that my method fire underscore outbound plug name underscore PLG has been called. So this is an object and it's calling a method called fire underscore outbound plug name underscore PLG. As simple as that. That's it. My job for view 2 is done. I will activate my view 2. Now I go to my main view. So right now we have just done the backward navigation part. So we'll do the same thing in the main view as well. So we go to main view and go to inbound plug. First define inbound and outbound plug for the main view. So I first define the inbound plug for the main view. And then I define the outbound plug for my main view. Now I go to option layout. The layout option now, I'm going to create a button which will take me out of my main view. So right click on the root element container to define next UI element, which is my button for navigating to view 2. So I insert an element as button. They go to UI element type as button. Click on OK. Now we'll provide the text property of this button as, let's say, navigate to next screen. And the same way, the way we created action for the back button, we will create the action for this button as well. So we scroll down in the properties of the button and we can see that there is an event for called on action. So now click on create button to create an action for this go to button. Provide the action name as go to. And now I need not have to go and separately generate the code in the method because I can specify my outbound plug name right away here. So at the time of creating action itself, my code will be generated if I provide my outbound plug name. So my outbound plug name for main view is out underscore main. And we click on OK. So along with the action, my this time code will be generated. So double click on the action, go to, it will navigate you to the method. So when I navigate to the method, I can see that the code for calling the outbound plug is being generated by default because this time, along with the action creation, I provided the outbound plug name. So my main view is also done. So when calling these buttons, we are firing the outbound plug. So we are just instructing the view that you have to go out of a view. But when you're going out of a view, you don't know which view you are going inside then. So you have to define the navigation as well because it's just triggering the outbound plug on the action of the buttons. So that navigation we define in window. So I double click on the window. Okay, I'll first activate my main view. As I mentioned, you define the navigation path declarative in your program. So when you created the window, the main view was created along with it. So by default, the main view is part of your window. But view 2 we have created later point of time. So we have to drag the view 2 to make it part of window. So we will select the view 2, drag it and drop it to the window. You can see that main view and view 2 has been created now as part of window. When you expand the views, you can see the inbound and outbound plugs are shown. So when you click on go to next, navigate to next screen, the outbound plug of main view has been triggered. So we drag this outbound plug and drop it to inbound plug of view 2. To specify that when this outbound plug is fired, you have to navigate to view 2. So we drag this outbound plug and drop it to inbound plug of view 2. It gives me a pop-up and say OK. So you can see the navigation link has been created. Same way, when you press back button on view 2, you want to come back to the main view. So when you press back button, the outbound plug of view 2 is triggered. So drag the outbound plug of view 2 and drop it to inbound plug of main. Click on OK button. And you can see that my outbound plug of view 2 is linked with the inbound plug of main view. That's it. All the code will be generated in the background. Webdynpro will handle all such things automatically. You just have to do everything declaratively. Now I will activate my window. So my application is already running in the browser page. I open up the browser page and refresh my page. You can see that the button is available now. So I'll give you the control. You can take the control on my system and just click on navigate button. And you can see that now you can navigate back and forth. So let's enter some data here. So let's say Web Dynpro ABAP. And I want to show this text on the next screen now. So I want to show this text on the next screen. So as I mentioned earlier, this value will go and sit in the attribute 1 which you have defined in the context. So now it is pretty easy to show this stuff on the next screen. So what I have to do is I go to the view 2 and I'll navigate to the context section of view 2. So on the right hand side, I can see my component controller here as well, because component controller is a central controller for all the other controllers. So for view 2 and main view, this is the central controller. I drag and drop the node 1 again to the view 2. So again, I do a context mapping with the view 2 as well. So my main view will change this attribute value. That attribute value will reach to the component controller. And from component controller, the changed value will reach to my view 2. So you can see the advantage of putting my node in the component controller. I can share the data between multiple controllers. In this case, I share the data between main view controller and my view 2 view controller. So now that attribute 1 value, which you change it on the first screen, will automatically reach to the view 2. What you just need to do, display this value into a UI element. So I go to layout and create a UI element to display this value. So the UI element which we'll be using is text view UI element. Text view UI element is being used to display some text values. So I create a text view UI element on the screen, and there is a property for this called text property. I will bind this text property with the same attribute ATTR1. So I click on bind button and select my ATTR1 to bind it with the text view element. That's it. Activate the view tool. Come back and refresh the page. So maybe you can enter some value and click on navigate to next screen. You can see that value has been transferred to the next screen without any change. So that's the power of component controller. It can share the data between multiple controllers with the help of context mapping. So whatever you're seeing here is the view part, and the context section, what you have is the model part, and finally you have the controller part which controls the business logic. So if you want to see the browser rendering, we can select the element and just select whichever element rendering you want to see, and you can see that it has shown me an A tag. A tag is mainly used for clickable elements. So that's the rendering of UI element. You can even select the text view to see how it is being rendered, where it is being positioned in the DOM structure. You can see it's being structured here as a span tag, and that's the text value. But the rendering of this is not our purpose here. The rendering will be done by Web Dynpro framework. We don't have any control over that. So we will just close this part and we will move on to the next part of this exercise, wherein I want to show you how to embed a view inside another view. So just like in basic ABAP, you can embed a screen inside a subscreen area. We can also embed a view in Web Dynpro inside another view. So let's create another view. I right click on the views and create a third view. Let's say I want to show material data. So I'll create a material view. So let's say the BW material. So that's my material view. And I go to the context section, and this time I will not use the mapping to define my context node. I will create a local node as part of my material view controller. So that node will be purely local node. It will not be shared with any other controller because I'm not defining that in the component controller. I'm creating it only in the view controller of material view. So now I right click on the context, create and create a node. And now I give the node name as material. So let's say if you want to create material master data, in such case, you have so many fields, like let's say you have 100, 200 fields. It is difficult to add each attribute inside this node one by one. So we can directly reference a node with the data dictionary structure or table. So I give my dictionary structure name as Mara here, which is the material master table, so that I can create my attributes automatically from data dictionary table. So enter my table name and now select option add attributes from structure. So now system is going to show me all the material master data fields. So I can select the fields which I want to become an attribute of this node. Let's say material number, plant, and material INS. So you can see that after the selection, all those three attributes are now part of my node material. You can also add more attributes. It's not like you cannot change it. There is a still option to change it. You have to click on the right bottom corner from component structure, and it will open up the structure again, and you can still add some more attributes of your choice. So in total, I've selected 5 now. So you can see all 5 attributes are now part of my material node. That's a very interesting technique by which you can create the nodes easily. So now I go to the layout. Let's say you have added 100 attributes. So to add the 100 fields for each attribute, it's a laborious process if you go by previous technique, wherein you define the UI element and then bind it with one by one attribute. So Web Dynpro has given us a easier way of creating the input fields directly from the context. So go to the layout and choose the option called Create Container From. So Create Container From is the option which I will choose instead of Insert Element. Insert element you choose when you want to insert one by one element, and later point in time you will do a binding on your own. But if you want to create the UI elements with respect to the context, directly you can choose this option. So now it opens up a pop-up and I click on context button. So when I click on context button, the system is showing me the context of current controller, wherein I can see my material node is also available. So double click on my material node. You can see the system is proposing me that all these attributes will be created as input field UI element, and one of them it will be created as a checkbox. I can keep it checkbox or I can change it as something else as well. So let me create this as a text view. So MBRSH will be created as a text view and rest all will be created as input fields. So I click on OK. System will automatically add these UI elements for me. So this is the same option the way we have in basic ABAP screen painter, add fields from structure. The same option we have here as well. So all your 100, 200, 500 fields will be created automatically when you use this option from the context. Along with this, you can see that the labels are also created. So now I want to display the screen as part of my main view screen. So let's activate this view 3 first, your material view. Now we will embed this view inside the main view. So just like in basic ABAP, you have to create a subscreen area. Here we will create a view container UI element. So I go to main view, wherein I want to embed this material view, and I insert an element called view container UI element. So first I right click on the root UI element container, insert a new element, and give an ID to it. Let's say my container, mat container, and the type as view container UI element. So that's just exactly like a subscreen area where you can place a screen. So that's a view container UI element. I will activate the main view. So right now you just place the subscreen area, but in basic ABAP you also have to define which screen is going to come and sit into this subscreen area. Similarly, in here you have to specify which view is going to come and sit in this view container area. That we will do in the window again. So I navigate to the window. Expand the window. Expand the main view. And you can see that mat container is being visible here. So in this mat container, I want to show my material view. So I drag my material view and drop it to the mat container. So that's how you embed a view inside a container. You can see now my mat view is part of my view container, which is then inside the main view. Let's activate the window and the job is done. So I come back to my main view, my application which is running, and refresh my page. You can see that all the material fields are now part of my main view, which were part of my material view. Since I've embedded the material view in the main view, they are now part of my first screen. Since these fields are created using data dictionary reference, you will get all the standard searches.
Is it possible to change the font size?
Yes, you can change the size. You can change the size, you can rearrange the UI elements in proper order. So that's something called a layout property we use. We will talk about the layout property in the next unit. So there I'll show you how to arrange these UI elements, how to make them align properly, how to use different UI elements to arrange your screen elements, different layout properties, different types of containers. There are a lot of things to learn. But you can see that standard F4 help is also available for the material because I've created this from the data dictionary. So when I press F4, it shows me the F4 help in the Webdynpro screen. A beautiful screen comes up along with the search criteria, and probably I select 1000 super points as my material and say OK. So the data is transferred back to my material feed. Same way the way we do it in ABAP. Any doubts so far?
The container part, the last part what we had the container, we were trying to embed the view to a container. I think I missed that in MVC architecture.
Okay. So let's look at the container part. What we are doing is we have created a view. So I've created a third view called material view. In this view, I've added some couple of input fields like this. So I've added some couple of input fields in this my material view. So like this, I've added those fields. And now I want to display this entire view as part of my main view. So how I can place this entire view inside my main view? So in basic ABAP, if you want to display a screen inside another screen, you have to use the subscreen concept. So in basic ABAP, you create a subscreen area, and in PBO and PI, you have to call that subscreen with a screen number. But in Webdynpro ABAP, you have a subscreen area substituted by something called a view container UI element. So in the main view, we place a view container UI element. So view container, as the name suggests, it can contain a view. So I placed a UI element called view container UI element in the main view. But the problem is you cannot directly embed this view in the view container. You have to go to window, and in the window you have to tell that I want to embed this view, which is the material view, as part of my view container. So that's what we did. We created a view container in the main view, and finally we navigated to the window. In the window, you can see the main view has a view container called mat container. In this mat container, I dragged the material view and dropped it here. So now my material view is part of this view container. And this view container is being placed inside my main view. So automatically your third view, which is material view, will be shown inside the main view. And main view is the starting view of the page. So you can see that when I start it, my material view is now part of my main view. So you will literally not see any difference here. For end user, they will not know that it's a sub view which is embedded in the main view. For them, it is just a page. Is it clear now?
May I ask one more question?
Yeah, sure.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
In the window, can that material view that we created, can that also be a part of view too?
Yes, it can be embedded. So you want to directly embed the view, material view as part of window. That also can be done. But to navigate to that, you need inbound and outbound plug. That also can be done, just like
No,
view
I mean, can it be? Yeah. Can it be part of view too also?
Yes, it can be part of view 2 as well. What you need to do is add a view container in the view 2 and similarly embed this view as part of view container. Let me show you that. So what I'll do is I'll go to view 2 now and create view container in the view 2 as well. So I'll navigate to the view 2 and create a view container in the view 2. So insert element in the view 2. And I create an element called view container UI element on the screen and say okay. So now I'm creating this container, view container UI element in the view 2. So let's activate the view 2. Now we go to the window. So this time you will embed the material view in the container for material, which is part of your view 2. So maybe you can take the control, drag the view material and drop it to the container for material. Yes. So now even this view will be part of your view 2 as well. So click on OK and activate the window. Very good. So let's go to the system, application, refresh the page. It will reload the entire page for us. So anyways, it's part of your main view, so it's shown on the first screen. When you will navigate to your view 2, you will even see that your material things are present in the view 2 as well. So maybe you can navigate to the view 2 and you can see that those fields are now even part of your view 2 as well. And the beauty about it, you can see that it's just one view, which is attached to the context of that. If you remember, we have created a material node. So it's the same node and same view which is referred in both the views. So all your data transport is automatically being taken care. You need not have to write additional code for data transport between the screens. So that's it for today. There is a small exercise at the end of class which you have to try out in the system. So you have to design a login application wherein you will have a database table containing the username and password of the user. And you will have 2 fields and 1 button on the first view where user enters the username and password. And fire a select query to check whether user credentials are correct in the table. When you click on that login button, which you will place on the UI, if the credentials are present and they are correct, navigate to the next view wherein you just put a label called login successful. Also provide a new user button which will take you to a create user page. If you click on that new user button, it will ask you to create a new user and save your new user into database table. So that's a pretty small exercise to start with. You can complete that, and if you have any doubt, maybe we can discuss that in the next session. Thank you.